Welcome to Aircrew Interview. I'm Mike and this episode is with Rich Goodwin. Rich is a former RAF Tornado GR1 pilot and he briefly chats about flying the jet as well as some stories from the Gulf War. But the main focus of the interview is his airshow display flying in the Pitts S2S. So if you like what we do here, head over to patreon.com/aircrew interview to help us out for as little as $1 per month. And also visit us at aircrewinterview.tv to watch all of our other interviews and sign up to our newsletter. Enjoy!
So Rich, when did you first come to be interested in aviation?
I guess it stems from my father was in the Air Force and we were brought up surrounded by Lightnings. I think what really sticks in my mind is sitting on the crash gate at RAF Watersham back in the 70s and watching a Lightning squadron scramble. Just all lined up at the end of the runway, opening up the power, 30-second stream, taking off, getting to the end of the runway, reheating a rotation takeoff, they used to call it, and then just disappearing to the heavens. And you know, you could just feel your heart and your body be part of that experience.
Always an impressive sight.
Yeah, always impressive sight.
So Rich, when did you join the RAF?
I joined the Air Force in '84. Had to think about that. On a short service commission, or the option was a permanent commission as well. And went through the standard officer training, basic flying training, advanced flying training, and then was lucky enough to get put onto the Tornado GR1, the ground attack version.
Brilliant. So can you tell us a bit about your training on the Tornado?
Yeah, from what I can remember, well, there's two aspects to learning to fly the Tornado. First, you have to learn to fly it as an aeroplane, which we used to do at the Tri-National Service Unit at RAF Cottesmore, which is run by RAF, Italian Air Force, German Air Force, which is enlightening in itself. We had a lot of X-104 pilots trying to teach us how to fly this thing. First you learn how to fly it as an aircraft, its handling characteristics. It's fairly minimal, the training they give you on it. And then you go to the next step, which is learning to use it as a weapons platform, which you do we did it at RAF Honington. And from there you progress to a squadron, and I was sent to 9 Squadron in Germany. We had 4 Tornado squadrons based in Germany at that point because of the Cold War threat. Although a lot of the aircraft have come back to UK now because there's no longer that threat. It's a different kind of threat.
Yeah. So what was it like to fly?
Well, I don't know really what to compare it with. I never flew the Jaguar or the Harrier, but it was a very pleasant aircraft to fly, particularly at low level. The wing loading and its quietness and smoothness of ride really gave you a lot of confidence when you're flying around the hills, low level at 200 feet or 100 feet if it was Operation Low Flying in Canada and Goose Bay. Several large exercises, Goose Bay, Red Flag, Cold Lake, these are all exercises in North America and the west coast of America. Taught to, well, 2 aspects really. For operational low flying, the only place we could go and really fly at 100 feet, which was the way we used to exist when we had the Cold War threat, and also do large scale operations integrated with Americans, fighter sweep, electronic warfare, dropping live weapons, and these were done on the ranges out near Las Vegas at Red Flag.
So how did the Americans view the Tornado and the RAF?
I think when the Tornado first came in, the Americans were a bit hacked off, possibly, because the bombing results we used to get were quite good, particularly at low level. But since new technology came in, then I think the Americans overtook a bit on the laser guided stuff. Yeah. These were all sort of originally free-fall iron bombs. World War II bombs were either parachute strapped to it or a loft attack. Yeah. Impact points generated by computers. But then when the laser guided bombing came in, which I didn't experience until the Gulf War, then things became a lot more accurate.
So did you ever fly on operations?
Yeah, I flew in Operation Granby, Desert Storm. So I went out to the Gulf in the December '91, and the war started in, I think it was 13th of January. So originally the squadrons were being rotated, and then they suddenly decided they needed another squadron out there. So we were sent out as part of, I won't say leper colony, but it was like 4 14, 9, 31 Squadron, 17 Squadron, we all went out and we were based at Dhahran, and we had like a 2-week workup out, Operation Low Flying in the desert. And then all of a sudden, one afternoon, the boss said, right, that's it, and then we're flying. And we thought, oh, well, we haven't really done much practice yet. Loaded the weapons up, and no one really knew what was going to happen until we woke up the next morning, Sky Television, and 8 of our colleagues had been called in secretly to go and run the first wave from Bahrain, from Dhahran, and from Tabuk. So we had 3 squadrons operating out there, all part of the integrated package, and the types of delivery. War was a terrible thing. It's an awful thing to be involved with, although I was proud to do what I was asked to do. We were dropping loft attack, low-level loft bombing on Iraqi airfields, and then we went to medium-level bombing, and then high-angle dive, daylight bombing, and then laser-guided bombs in conjunction with the Buccaneers. But operations out there presented its new challenges because I'll just wait for that to get past. Yeah. Operations out there presented new challenges for us Germany-based squadrons because during the Cold War we had no necessity for air-to-air refuelling, and all operations out in Desert Storm would require air-to-air refuelling. Typically missions are about 3.5 hours long, and so we all had to do literally a crash course in air-to-air refuelling. So literally a few weeks before we went out to theatre, the only tanker assets we had in the UK were based in UK, and we'd meet up over the North Sea, have a very quick go at tanking, and said, right, that's you signed off. But there's a lot more to air-to-air fueling than just a couple of sorties. And then they said, right, you've done that, now you've got to go and do it at night. And none of us had done any night formation. So I might sort of think that we were a bit of a peacetime Air Force up until that point, but yeah, having trained for lots of different types of roles, it wasn't too difficult to adapt to the new scenario that we needed to do.
So how long did you spend out there?
The duration of the war. So I did 21 bombing missions out there, which has meant flying every few days really. It started beginning of January. I think we came back in the spring sometime, which was a good thing to fly one of the jets back. And I remember landing at RAF Bruggen, and all the wives were out there, had the RAF band, and being a bit cheesy, I'd gone to a flower shop and bought some roses, and I had them in the back of my aeroplane. So when the canopy opened, I was allowed to give my wife a bunch of roses, which pissed off all the other pilots because they hadn't thought about it.
So have you got any memorable stories you can share with us from your time over there?
I guess the hardest thing is just knowing whether you could actually, you'd done all this training back in the United Kingdom, and you talked about enemies, war, being shot at, but you'd never actually experienced it for the first time yourself. And I think what happens is a lot of people, we've got aircraft out in the Gulf at the moment, in Syria, and the Middle East. Those guys are being shot at, they're under real threat all the time. And I don't think the general public really appreciate what our armed forces actually go and do day to day for us in order to keep world peace or try and maintain some sort of civilized peace. But yeah, I've got a few stories. I think if I'm honest with myself, one of my biggest fears was possibly knowing whether I could actually strap into this jet with 5,000-pound bombs and take off and go and do what we've been asked to do, because until you've actually done it, you don't really know how you're going to feel about it. You can train all you like, but my first mission, it was on the second or third night of the war, and we were dropping loft bombs from a low-level attack, and we're an 8-ship. I think a couple went US on startup, and we eventually ended up as a 6-ship. But the way we used to operate, we'd have 1 Victor, 4 Tornadoes, 2 Tornadoes in each wing, and you'd rotate through the tanker in order to get the fuel before you dropped off the tanker tow line down to low level. It was the time of year where the intertropical convergence zone, which is a weather phenomena for that around the world, but it just happened to be sitting around about the border between Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and that produces a lot of convective activity and turbulence. And typically the tanker tow line would be at about 15,000 feet, but you need to do air-to-air refueling in visual conditions. Although it might be at night, and in order to get VMC outside some of these cumulonimbus clouds, the tankers had to climb up to something like 20,000 feet. I can't remember exactly. But none of us had ever flown an aeroplane. I dropped bombs in UK, I dropped practice bombs, I dropped 1,000 pounder, but today I was flying with two 2250 litre tanks and 5,000 pound bombs. So the actual weight of the aircraft was the heaviest I've ever flown before. This is my first ever live bombing mission. And so when the tankers started to climb up, we were flying the aeroplane in and out of Mac Buffet, because normally a tank in, I think, 45 wing, but maybe we had to go, or 33 wing, no, 25 wing, 25 wing. But we had to develop a technique to bring the wing back so it wouldn't get into Mac Buffet, and we're putting the burner in and out while on the tanker. So it was, and the tanker tow line, I remember I was flying with my navigator called Dave Catterson, who left the Air Force shortly after that. He got, because of the turbulence, the hose pipe coming out the back of the Victor was just whipping up and down, like somebody with a
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, okay, with a whip, and you sort of see the films with people with beads of sweat coming off their forehead and stuff like that, chewing gum. Well, I wasn't chewing gum, but I'm sure I had those beads of sweat. And my navigators, they're fairly helpless in the back there, except give you words of encouragement, saying, "Go on, Rich, you can do it, you can do it." And it was a question of the air-to-air fueling technique on the Tornado. You would never try and chase the basket because it used to hit the bow wave, and you never get close to it. You have to sort of stand back and just drive in. And with the hose going up and down, you just pick a moment, give it a go, drive in, it would miss, come back, give it a go. And I think the biggest fear was actually not being able to get the fuel, and then not be able to do what you'd asked to be done, and then go home. And yeah, I think the pressure was on, not necessarily going to do the job, but well, what if I went home because I couldn't get the fuel on? People might say, that's a bit strange. But after that, things got even worse. After you come off the tanker, you have enough fuel to do the mission. You let down as I think we were a 7 ship or a 6 ship, and you let down to low level. During that process of letting down on the terrain following radar, there's quite a lot of talk between the front and back cockpit. And during the letdown, I suddenly couldn't speak to Dave, my navigator. And this is quite a critical phase of flight, because there's a lot of checking backs and forwards on the terrain following radar, that it's all working correctly. And I kind of had a big concern about, well, I can't speak to him now, what am I going to do? And then when I get to the target, how are we going to make all the switches live and talk between front and backs? There's quite a lot of coordination. And then I had at the back of my mind, well, what can I possibly do? I can't turn back because everyone will say I'm a wimp. So continue to let down to low level, and it's never. And the obvious place is where your PLB connects into the seat. There might be a bad connection. Tried that, recycled that. This is at low level with the automatic pilot in, but terrain following radar, and then all of a sudden I felt you've got a mic tail lead that goes into the side of the helmet, and that had actually come loose. Now I checked it and we've got comms back, but I hate to think of what had happened if I thought, well, I can't carry on with this, and turned back and then got home and plugged it in and thought, oh, there's nothing wrong.
So Rich, how long did you spend on Tornadoes, and did you enjoy your time on them?
I owe everything in my life in terms of flying to what the Air Force gave to me in terms of training me. I think I've probably been a bit of a waster unless they'd taken hold of me, given me some officer training, and then taught me some flying skills. And I did about 4.5 years on the Tornado, 1,000 hours before I left. One of the highlights before I left, because my father was in the Air Force, the boss kindly said, yeah, you can take your dad flying. So
that must have been cool.
That was pretty cool. And he used to be based in Germany in the Hunter, so yeah, we took off, took some bombs, flew over the dams, went up to I can't remember, one of the airfields he used to be based at, flying the Hunter up in Nordhorn. Went to the Nordhorn Ranges, dropped some bombs, and then up to Vlieghorst, did a GCA at one of the Dutch airfields where he used to be based, and yeah, that was a real thrill for both of us, actually.
Something you'll never forget.
I'll never forget, no. Well, I really enjoyed aerobatics in the Air Force. Obviously, you know, we get taught to aerobatics, University Air Squadron, Hawk, and yeah, they have small competitions as you go through training, which I did okay in. And then when I left the Air Force in '93, went into commercial aviation, which is a different type of flying, equally as challenging. And about 10 years ago, I decided to get back into a bit of light aircraft flying, and it started with an Acura Sport and then a Christian Eagle, and then I started to think, well, there's got to be more to it than this. Started doing aerobatics again, and then joined the British Aerobatic Association to do some competition aerobatics at standard, intermediate, and briefly at advanced, because the biplane or Christian Eagle wasn't well suited to, you can't do unlimited aerobatics or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed the time with the British Aerobatic Association and the skills it helped me develop, and it really put, although I had a fair bit of discipline in my flying anyway from my background, but into doing aerobatics, it put some discipline into going out, flying a fixed routine, coming down, being told you're rubbish by the judges, and then going have another go. But it's great experience, and I used it as a bit of a stepping stone into getting my display authorization and starting to try and develop air shows with the biplane. Now, we had a Christian Eagle, and I did a small bit of display flying with the Christian Eagle, which is an amazing aeroplane. But I happened to be in America watching an air show in America. I saw a guy flying one of these biplanes, and he was doing some unbelievable aerobatics with it, and I thought, wow, how's that possible? Yeah, I've got to have a go at this, and subsequently found out that it's, yeah, you've got to have an aeroplane with a big engine, a powerful engine, and that's quite big enough to see at air shows. And I looked at modifying the Christian Eagle, putting 6-cylinder engines in it, and then I've been building another aeroplane for quite a while, so I knew a bit about the Light Aviation Authority. And then I started to understand you can't just bolt things on to aeroplanes like they can in America. I mean, the things they do in America are obviously very, very safe and well thought through, but you don't have to prove any of it on paper. You can go and do it, and if it works, you can fly it. And so then I thought, well, I need to try and. I thought about building an airplane from scratch in order to, with a big engine, a biplane in particular. This looked like a pretty bit of a challenge in terms of its the documentation involved, and so then I switched my focus into buying a home-built biplane, which we could modify, and that's when I bought the Pitts S2S. They only built about 30 anyway, and not many of them were home-built or experimental. And in terms of, in order to produce a great airshow aircraft, an airshow aerobatics is very different to competition aerobatics. It's more, you know, what people want to see, I suppose, or what looks unusual and strange in the air, and in order to get booked at air shows. So I remortgaged the house, bought this plane. My wife wasn't particularly happy with me at the time. I think she actually burst into tears when I told her. But sometimes, you know, you only live once, and you've got to do these things. And so I thought, I guess I had that small nagging at the back of my mind, having done the Air Force bit and done the commercial airline bit. My father was in the Air Force. He displayed the Hunter and Lightning, and I thought, well, I wouldn't mind doing the air show bit. And I guess that's where it started. So remortgaged the house, bought the plane, and then subsequently took it all apart and had to start from scratch with negotiating with the Light Aviation Authority in terms of the changes we might make to the aeroplane in order to make it a great airshow performer. And it's not new stuff, it's all stuff that's been done in America, and you know, obviously I had to look towards America for help, and got a great design engineer called Eddie Salmon, who helps other airshow pilots in America develop their aircraft, improve their aircraft, make them more predictable, and make them more spectacular, but in a very safe way.
So how do you go about creating a display sequence?
I know the sort of manoeuvres my airplane is capable of, and I've been told by other people which ones look more interesting. So I try and, some manoeuvres are actually quite difficult, but don't look that spectacular to, someone standing on the ground. So I try and now fly the easiest manoeuvres, because it gives you a lot more spare brain cells to worry about positioning of the airplane, because weather actually and wind affects quite a lot the positioning of the aircraft. And if you can keep it tight and really close in front of the display audience consistently, they'll enjoy it a lot more. So I know what manoeuvres it's capable of. I mean, in my airplane, you look at what other people fly in America, and they've been doing it for 20 or 30 years longer than me in these, what we might call a muscle biplane. So it would be silly for me not to look at what those guys are doing, because they've had a lot more experience at it, and in terms of developing the airplane as well. The difficulty in this country is getting it through the red tape and the hoops. So they've got a 20-30 year head start, and I look at the manoeuvres that are enjoyable to the public, and then just try and link them all up. But I'll only change the routine by maybe 3 or 4 manoeuvres each year, because at the end of the day, I can go and ask people at air shows, "Are you getting bored with my display yet?" And no one really notices you flying the same thing all the time. I always try and fly the same, roughly the same routine, because I know it very, very well, and I can think then about the other aspects of flying, when maybe things either go slightly wrong, or you're having to work hard to keep your position.
So do you have to differ your routine for each airshow site?
I know I'll differ the beginning and the end, and it depends a lot on the prevailing wind and the takeoff direction, and also whether I'm actually taking off at the airshow or not. If the weather's nice and it's a beautiful blue sky, and it's not at an airfield, then I would do a high start, which is like a 13 turn spin from a loop, purely because it produces a fantastic image in the sky, the white smoke spiraling down against the blue sky. If I'm flying from an airfield, I always display from takeoff, because the airplane has the capability, and it's normally into some sort of high alpha knife edge manoeuvre, which has taken me a long time to get authorised by the CAA. A lot of people say that's illegal, but actually it's on my display licence, and but it's been risk assessed, and the airplane has been built and designed to be capable of it. So it's not. It looks risky, but it's not risky at all. But that's what we do with airshow flying: try and make the impossible look easy. Or is it the other way around? No.
So how often do you get to practice your display?
Once the airshow season starts, that's it. Every show is a practice. But I'll start, we'll get the annual on the airplane done and put it all apart and have it all back together for sort of March, April. And then I spend a fairly intense month at Gloucester Airport, and I should mention them here because they are fantastic. They've got a Rule 5 exemption, and they allow me to practice in the overhead, and I start whatever sequence I'm going to fly up at 1,000 feet and then work it down again. Now, after having had a winter break, it's amazing actually. I'll go up and do some gyroscopic manoeuvres or spinning type manoeuvres, and it makes me feel really ill. So for those of you that are airsick, you will get used to it. It only takes maybe 3 or 4 flights, and then you get your tolerance levels back to G and to, I suppose, feeling airsick.
So do you have a favourite manoeuvre you perform?
I suppose I quite like the Tower of Power because it's a bit unpredictable, and that manoeuvre, you run in very high speed, you put up in front of the crowd, do a 3/4 roll, and then a sort of a negative tumble or snap roll, and try and stop it in the vertical, and then we go into what's called a torque roll, so try and leave a big pile of smoke and then turn the smoke off and do a torque roll, and it won't fly backwards, but it does go backwards a long way, this aeroplane, particularly if you get it right. Now it's a bit unpredictable, probably because I'm not skillful enough to get it right every time, but normally it looks quite impressive anyway, and if you get a torque roll right, it really does look impressive, the aeroplane actually coming backwards.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably 50% success rate on that.
Yeah. Can you remember your first airshow display?
Yeah, the only reason I got into it wasn't just because I wanted to do it, but the local village show knew I had a biplane. They said, "Oh, can you come and do a display?" And I thought, I didn't know that you had to have a display authorization or anything. So I thought, yeah, I'll do that. And then I looked into it in a bit more detail and realised actually there's quite a lot of, you have to have a display authorization, there's all sorts of other stuff. And I thought, oh well, I'll never be able to do that. It all looks too complicated and difficult. And I went to a seminar in London, and it became apparent actually, well, no, it's not impossible. It is achievable. You just need to apply yourself to it. And I hadn't really applied myself to anything flying orientated for quite a while in terms of getting qualifications or requalified. And the colleague I went with said, that doesn't sound that difficult, we can do that. And so that's basically where the process started, and I got my first display authorization with, in fact, a guy you might have heard of called Barry Tempest. There is a connection that goes quite a long way back, because my father used to display the Hunter at Little Rissington a long time ago. Barry started his flying career working in the hangar and then flying gliders, and my father and Barry got together and they came out with a double act where my father would fly the Hunter and Barry would fly the glider, and they called it Sound and Silence. So it's nice to sort of see a completed circle, I suppose. My dad got Barry into display flying and his display flying career, and then Barry started me off with doing my display authorization. So yeah.
So how long does the work-up take from training in the cockpit to your first airshow?
In the first year, or first couple of years, how long's a piece of string? This year I probably spent at least 10 flights practicing some new things I wanted to do, getting reacclimatized, and then I'd spend at least maybe eight full run-throughs of my display. And depending on the weather, I wouldn't want to do more than 1 or 2 flights a day. But yeah, I'm keen to sort of introduce new elements to it each year. So I'll see what other people are doing around the houses. I know what my airplane does well, and really, just expand upon that. I'll try and make it more interesting next year. But you have to be well rehearsed and practiced before the first display of the season.
Yeah.
And in fact, the first display this year, I think, was Abingdon. I actually went to site and rehearsed on site, because one of the problems is you can go and practice over a railway line, but you can't go below, certain heights. It's nothing like actually practicing at 200 feet over a runway where there's a crowd line and operating to 150 meters or 230 meters. So yeah.
So Rich, what's it like to actually fly?
I guess I'm the only one that knows what it's like to fly, and Alan Cassidy, who does some of the test flying for me. But it's a beautiful airplane to fly. It's incredibly forgiving, and I'm very spoiled because we've got a lot of power. I have to be careful. We've got access to Pitts S2S, which is a 2-seat version, and this airplane is very different to the other one. So I might go and fly the 2-seat version, try and do some a variety of manoeuvres, but the manoeuvres are not possible in a 2-seat version, whereas in this one they are. So, and in terms of recovering it from unusual attitudes in the gyroscopic manoeuvres, it recovers very precisely, very predictably, and partly that's because there's a lot of power. So I wouldn't be trying these sort of manoeuvres in an aeroplane with less power. Yeah. You can fly it very, very high alpha on the stall, mostly with thrust, and with obviously the wing virtually stalled. It's pretty controllable. I generally restrict that sort of flight to about 800 feet in case the engine does stop. People may wonder why I'm so high when we're flying it in that attitude, but if the engine stops, you need about 800 feet to recover. Yeah, don't be put off by any stories you hear about Pitts specials, other than landing them. But I've got used to landing them now, so it's you don't relax till you turn the engine off in the Pitts.
So what's it like to maintain?
Well, I do all the maintenance myself. I do have some guys that help me occasionally, particularly if we need to recover any components, or if I need to do any welding. I've got a certified welder that helps me, but it's a pretty basic aeroplane. You've got an engine, an altimeter, airspeed indicator, an engine instruments, and a stick, and a rudder, obviously. So it's fairly basic, and that's the beauty of the Pitts. Some of the components can be quite expensive, particularly when you start modifying engines. But in terms of maintaining it, because we're at air shows, and safety is always at the back of my mind. In terms of, it's not just reliability, but in terms of the structural integrity of the aeroplane. So it's not like a complex jet, but we do everything possible to make it as safe as possible and the engine as reliable as possible. So I analyse, when we change the oil every 25 hours, it goes off for analysis in America. I've got the engine is monitored by a state-of-the-art microprocessor, and so we monitor all aspects of the engine, and I can look at that on a computer if necessary. It's got a very good oil cooling system and a very good oil pickup system. So people see the airplane flying on its side and think, oh, it must be starving it of oil, but actually in the oil sump, it's got a swing arm, a bit like a flop tube in a fuel tank, to make sure that we always have oil supplied to the engine. And the prop is MT supply the prop. They help me with the propeller, and it's serviced every 2 years because we are giving it quite a lot of abuse. But then it was designed to be used like that. So maintaining it, really, its annual is look for the cracks, inspect it very closely, do all the normal stuff on the engine, and wheels and brakes. Yeah. and the airplane is as simple as that. Yeah.
So, do you have any memorable airshow displays? One that sticks out?
Particularly this year. It's really nice to be invited to them all, and I feel very honoured to be invited. I think last year I couldn't believe it when Farnborough said, "Oh, could you come and display?" Yeah. And that was a real highlight. And we did it with some pyrotechnics, and it was great to be part of one of the biggest air shows in the world.
Yeah.
This year I love going to the military shows because all air shows I love going to, particularly those air shows that encourage our younger generation into aviation, and that's a very big part of air shows, I think, now, is the science, technology, education, maths, and getting our 7, 8, 9-year-olds interested in aviation and all aspects of aviation. It can provide a great career, it provides great industry, and I think it's something that we're very strong on in the United Kingdom, is air shows, and we need to use that to lever as many people as possible into those industries, particularly now we're leaving the EU, so we can really stand on our own feet in the aerospace world. So I'm particularly keen on those air shows that really support that, and But if I was to pick a couple of air shows, military air shows, Scampton's great to be invited to Scampton. I suppose it replaced Waddington, and I suppose Sanacol is my first official international air show, and they really knew how to entertain a crowd. They had a fantastic social event, and also I think it was probably because it's one of the last displays of the season I flew. The weather was nice, a very, very strong on-crowd wind, very, very challenging. I was very paranoid about busting any limits to my first international show. But I felt after all the air shows I'd done this summer that that was probably one of the better displays I flew. I always tried quite critical. No one else really knows what I do well or badly. But I think that should have looked okay. And it's really nice at the end to have the organiser come up to me, who's been in air shows for 40 years and runs the European Airshow Council, and shook my hand and said, "Great display, Rich." That really meant a lot to me. Yeah. So I hope to go back one day. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick tour of the aeroplane now. Most of you who have flown Pitts will probably recognise a lot of the features because it is pretty much a standard Pitts with a few sort of bolt-on hot rod parts. So I don't know if you can see in the cockpit, but it's pretty basic. I did rewire it and rebuild the instrument panel. But one of the most important things I have is a small ICAS, or engine monitoring system. It's provided by JPI, but it monitors every aspect of the engine. All 6 EGTs, CHTs, oil pressure, fuel pressure, manifold air pressure, everything, and it can all be downloaded from a memory stick onto the computer, so I can look at what's going on should I have any issues. The rest of it is just a basic VFR instrumentation setup, although I do have some little stick-on AHRs, although it's not IFR approved, in case we get stuck above cloud or need to penetrate cloud. It's quite a small cockpit. I'm just going to turn the power off. So the fuel system is quite different. It has 2 fuel tanks, but we only use one of them for display. But it has a separate header tank, so I can display this aeroplane unlimited aerobatics down to 10 litres of fuel. So consequently, it's got a big fuel tank, but I only ever display or start my display with maybe 30 or 40 litres of fuel, which keeps the weight down, and it's all about weight and power. I think you can just see, yeah, don't worry too much. Don't worry too much about that. I'll shut the canopy, some terrain. Okay, moving forward at the moment, I've got a standard Pitts S2S or S2B wings on with symmetrical ailerons. We've got a standard aerobatic sight, which I can't do without. And moving forward, we have a very different cowling, which is 2/2 carbon cowling, and there's a lot less profile drag on this cowling, and it cools incredibly well. The 6-cylinder engine that's inside there. We've got 2 oil coolers, one at the back and one mounted on the front baffle, and it's got a Skydynamics air induction system, cold air induction sump, which has got the swing arm oil pickup, so when we do knife edge manoeuvres we have continuous oil supply. It's got an airflow performance fuel injection unit, which is much bigger than standard sort of thing they use on the Red Bull Air Race aircraft, and with the modifications, electronic ignition on the engine, it produces around about 300 horsepower, which the original stock engine was about 260 horsepower. The undercarriage, the standard Pitts undercarriage has been removed, and the gear legs are titanium rod mounted on the engine mount, which all has to be approved by the Light Aviation Authority. We've got an amazing propeller designed by MT Props. It's a wide chord aerobatic blade, and it produces an amazing amount of thrust with the 300 horsepower engine. It's the same prop as they have on the extra 300 SCs. We've got a 6-into-1 exhaust, which helps with the breathing of the engine and the volumetric flow rate through the engine in terms of producing the extra power. The S2S fuselage, just out of interest, is about 7 or 8 inches shorter than the standard S2B or S2A fuselage, and with the bigger engine and only one cockpit, it puts the centre of gravity in just the right spot for some of those gyroscopic manoeuvres that the aeroplane is so good at. Moving around to the back of the aeroplane, we've got a modified rudder. So as you can see, it's a lot bigger than the original, and we've also chopped off the top of the fin, welded it along here to give it an aerodynamic balance. Now, I've got a new elevator which comes out to about here, which is much bigger, and we test flew it at the end of last summer. Unfortunately, we had a few flutter issues with that at the VNE test, so while I've been displaying over the summer, we haven't had it on the aeroplane, and it's now modified and ready to test again. So we'll be trying to put the different enhanced tailplane on. But the new aeroplane I'm building has got the most amazing wings, only the second set flying in the world when they do fly. Similar in structure, but very different shape, and the aileron is a very different design. So that'll be on the new fuselage, which is nearing completion. It'll have the same rudder, same gear. The engine will be more powerful because we've got an aftermarket, we're using AX50 cylinders, so hopefully we should get about 330 horsepower out of the engine, which all adds to the fun of it. It's also, the new fuselage has got a really nice side hinged canopy with a carbon front coaming as well. You can see I've got various logos on the aeroplane, and obviously this has been one of the biggest challenges. Funding all this is not cheap, and generally revenue from air shows doesn't cover it. But I'm really pleased to say that my main sponsor, Anana, a software company who develop call center technology and systems for several large brands, popular brands in the United Kingdom. They've been incredibly supportive, and they really love the aeroplane. They love the images that all those photographers take, and once again I'm really thankful for the great photographers that we have at these air shows. They're a really big part of the process. I don't give much to them because I don't have much to give, but occasionally we give out some t-shirts and things like this, really just a way of saying thank you very much, because they're all part of the process of trying to keep us running and keep our sponsors on board, and keep different acts coming to the airshow industry. Recently Bremont Watches and Bose have contributed with Rocket Route, Transair. They all help me in some way, shape or form, plus also the people that make some of the products on the aircraft, whether it be Skytech, the starter, JPI providing some instrumentation for the engine. It's been the whole 5 or 6 years being involved in the airshow industry and trying to get help from various manufacturers has been a real enlightening experience for me. It's one that I've really enjoyed, one that's been a lot of hard work, but I enjoy it. I love the building, and really looking forward to this winter, hopefully getting the next aircraft finished. And the colour scheme on that aircraft, we've got lots of ideas, but Mirko Pecorari of Aircraft Studio Design, who's a top Italian designer, he designed this amazing paint scheme on here. He'll be designing the next scheme, and we hope it's going to be something exciting for you guys to see next season. And then when we hopefully get the jet engines on it, if that ever happens, something else to look forward to.
So Rich, do you have any hobbies?
I almost have too many hobbies. Obviously my wife is one of my hobbies, and without the good support of my wife, none of this would be possible, so I'd like to thank Sarah. I like to keep fit, run. I used to kite surf, ski, some sort of adrenaline type sports, but I'm getting quite old now, and I think I'm just going to focus on this one, get the jet pits going. I'd really like to thank the people that have supported me in terms of sponsorship, particularly this year, Chris and Rog. What an amazing company to be involved with. and looking forward to their Christmas party, because that's something special as well.
So is there an aircraft you wish you could have flown?
I think I wish I could have flown the Lightning, purely for sort of family reasons. My father became quite famous in that world, and it would have been great if I'd been slightly younger. Maybe I'd have got through onto the operation conversion unit for the Lightning, but unfortunately it finished by the time I went through the training system. But to sit on those two Avon jet engines, little tiny cockpit on top, I guess I've got the, you know, the private version here.
So where can we find you online?
Online, it's www.richgoodwinairshows.co.uk. We try and keep the website updated. I must thank Donna, who does the website and a lot of my multimedia, to try and keep the sponsors exposed and keep everyone up to date with what's going on the development of the next aircraft.
And finally, do you ever get sick of talking about aviation?
I don't actually talk about it that much, other than when someone like yourself comes along. Yeah, I like to do other things. And winter time, I love the building of the aeroplane as well, and that's a big part of it for me. And I wish I'd, in many respects, got involved in this sort of thing, you know, many years ago. But it just goes to show, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but really I only got into this seriously, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, in terms of developing aeroplanes. I've learned so much. I've had so much help from Eddie in America, and a lot of other guys in America. And I wish some of that help was more accessible here in the United Kingdom. But maybe it will do one day, become more accessible.
Well, thanks very much for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for taking the time to come down.